everybody, and welcome to Rigby Yard in southern Portland, Maine. This is part of the Main Central Railroad, and this is a build that I've been looking forward to doing for a very, very long time. Thank you so much for joining me. Here we are. I'm not going to waste any time talking about what we're getting into here. This is a build, like I said, that I've been dying to do for many, many years. And in fact, I did actually build this yard several years ago in Trains 2012, I believe. And I used the dem file and everything, and lost it. And I haven't revisited this since. And you'll see why by the end of it, because it is a pretty enormous freight yard. I've been hitting at this for a little while now, and I'm finally getting around to it, which is really, really exciting. So a little bit about this project. This is going to be the Main Central Railroad Portland division. So we're going to be focusing mostly on Rigby Yard for the first few episodes, and then we're going to work our way up into Portland proper and our way north along the mountain division and somewhere else from there. I haven't decided exactly what we're going to explore after that. Right now, the dem file that I have mostly encompasses just the Portland area and not much else. So I wanted to start with this and see where we can go from there. I wanted to get this done first, obviously. This is a huge part of the Main Central Railroad. This was the interchange with the Boston and Maine and points south, and the southernmost terminal along the Main Central Railroad. So very, very busy place. I didn't count the amount of tracks in this yard, but I think it's somewhere up in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And man, it was quite the challenge to try to build. I'm using track maps from the 1970s and 1960s. It's kind of a variety, but I am using actual track maps and track charts from the day that we'll be modeling here. As the title suggests, we'll be sticking with the prototype around 1970. Well, the title says 1971, but really, I'm going to be focusing mostly on the 1965 to 1975, and that gives a pretty good dynamic range for rolling stock and the locomotive roster at the time. So that gives us access to a lot of the GP7s, GP9s, GP38s, the RS11s, RS3s. And even S1s or S2s, S3s. I always get those mixed up. So a lot of like switching units. The road units didn't come in, the GP38s, until about 1965 or so. And I think they got a fleet of about 18 or something like that. So pretty decent sized fleet. And then later on, there was the U25s, U25B, I believe is what they had. And they came around the mid 70s or so, and then later on was the U18Bs, and that was just before Guilford took over. So we're gonna try to extend the period enough that you could operate any of that equipment once we hopefully get enough of that made and skinned and whatever. And it should all look pretty cohesive and coherent here. But it is the Main Central, so I mean, as long as the paint schemes look proper, it should all pretty much fit. That said, I will be teaming up with JointedRail member Petrama25, and he is going to be helping me out getting this done and getting some equipment skinned and modeled and whatever else. And what the plan is actually going to be for this build is we're going to pass the route back and forth to each other each week. So kind of like a collab, but he's not going to be making videos. So essentially what's going to happen is I'm going to do my build and my video, and once my build is complete, I'm going to pass him the map file, and he's going to work on something. Could be scenery, could be track work, could be anything. So he's going to work on some stuff for a week and a half, then pass the map back to me. I do another video, and I'll recap everything that he's done, off camera sort of thing. So that way there's always something happening. This build is constantly happening. We can hopefully make progress on it really quickly. It's not an enormous map, but there's a lot to model, I think. And I'll show you that in the second half of this video, the live mode. I'll show you the rest of the dem. I think that's how you say it, right? Dem, D-E-M, the DEM file. So I'll show you that, and I think that's going to speed up the process, though, quite a bit. So that way it's not just one person, me, working on this whole thing, and then I can only alternate my time between this and then the P&B and whatever other builds that I'm doing. So I'm going to split it up, and if there's anybody else, any other JR members who decide they want to hop on and do some other sort of modeling on it, more scenery work or whatever, then they would definitely be welcome to do that, because the sooner we get this done, the better. But also, I guess I would like to say that passenger service had ended in the mid-50s, and for this map, I'm going to extend it, hypothetically, into this era. So that way we can have some kind of passenger functionality to it. Because I always say this, I love the idea of mixing passenger and freight operations, because you've got your freights that are just constantly pushing back and forth, it's very busy, especially out of a big yard like this, going north and south. And then you've got passenger trains trying to cut their way through. They're on a schedule. They're trying to bring people to places. They have to stick with those schedules. So it adds an interesting dynamic in terms of operations. So I definitely want to try to include that. And then if you don't want to operate the passenger stuff, you don't have to. But the option would be there, and I like to have options myself. So I guess I should talk a little bit about this map. Well, not the map, but what I'm doing on camera here. You'll notice my style here, I guess, on how I lay yards. And it could be a little bit sterile, I guess, because everything is just perfectly parallel. But that's the way I like to start. I can come back later and kind of mess things up a little bit, but I like to start and make sure that I get all the tracks laid out parallel. I have the right count of tracks and everything before I start doing that kind of stuff. So with this yard in particular, things get kind of crazy because there's actually a lot of different ladders involved here, and you'll see it throughout that there's ladders inside of ladders, and it gets very confusing. Like here's one right here, a ladder inside of the main yard ladder, and then there's a bypass track on the outside, and then a bypass track for the bypass track. So it got very confusing at points, and I had to pause the video, or stop it, I guess, quite frequently to look down and count tracks on this track map that I have, the schematics, and make sure everything was correct. And I was doing my best to stick within the actual lengths, the track lengths, as noted on the track work maps. And it's very difficult to do that because the angle of your yard ladder really can affect the length of your siding tracks, or whatever your holding tracks. So if your ladder is too shallow, you're gonna have shorter storage tracks. If it's really steep, you're gonna have longer tracks and then sharper junctions, which you don't really necessarily want sharper junctions. So you have to find that middle ground. It's very difficult to do, to know what the proper angle is gonna be. But that said, I kind of eyeballed it for the most part, and took measurements as I was going, and for the most part, it's within maybe 100 feet, so 1 or 2 car lengths, I would say. So it's pretty accurate. I did have to omit a few tracks in a few areas just because it started to become really redundant, and some of the trackage got really bizarre. Like I wasn't really sure how to note it and build it in trains because of the way that the tracks lay out and that sort of thing. It got very difficult, I'll put it to you that way. So some tracks are left out, but maybe it's probably less than 10%, probably closer to 5%, maybe even less than that. Something like that. It was very few tracks. And the track arrangements, again, I tried to just do my best to put the switches where they belonged, and just keep it as true to form as possible, so that if somebody from the Main Central who worked this rail yard back in the 70s wanted to, they might actually be able to navigate it pretty closely. So that I wanted to achieve that. I wanted it to be as accurate as possible. That's my thing. I like to have the accuracy. I want to represent the prototype, and I want to recreate it as best as possible. So that's what I was going for here, and I think I did a pretty decent job. It did get a bit repetitive to build all these parallel tracks and stuff. So I actually didn't include everything in the video. There's some spots where there's going to be a couple big jumps, mostly towards the end, because by that point I was like, oh my god, this is like a 20-minute time lapse. Nobody is going to be watching this by then. It's just the same tracks going over and over again. So I kind of cut out some of the boring parts, and I guess I kept in the parts where I'm clipping tracks and making things actually come to life. So here you can see I'm laying out this spur, which I'm not too sure where it goes to. It goes to South Portland somewhere. I know that they use it for storing maintenance of way equipment and that sort of deal. I think that they stopped using it for the most part like in the late 70s, so this is probably towards the end of its life. Right here is 2 parallel tracks that cut through this Y track here, and this was one of the things that I kind of had to modify a little bit because those parallel tracks were supposed to connect, as you're seeing, right to the Y, but because trains is very wonky when it comes to putting junctions on a curve, I just decided that I was going to connect it right after the curve. So the concept is still there. It still works functionally and everything, but it's not the exact translation of the track plan. But it's close enough, and it'll have the same effect. So again, I think that this, if I'm not mistaken, these siding tracks here were used for maintenance of way equipment and that sort of deal. Oh, you know what? I haven't even talked about the prototype necessarily, and what kind of stuff you'll see here. So Rigby Yard was shared by both the Maine Central Railroad and the Boston and Maine. So right now what we're working on is the Maine Central side of the storage yard. And on the other side, which you'll see in a few moments, that's the Boston and Maine side. So there's a lot of action here, and there's a lot of different types of engines and a lot of color and stuff, because the Boston and Maine had these beautiful blue and black locomotives, and then the Maine Central has these beautiful green and gold locomotives. And man, I can't wait to start scenic this and getting some of these locomotives down, because it's just gonna look so amazing. But anyway, very, very active yard. This area that I'm working on here is the not the car clean out track. That's the one to the left of that. I believe this one is marked as their piggyback area, and they didn't start piggyback operations until like the late 70s. So again, this is kind of one of those additions that could work for multiple things. You don't necessarily have to use it for piggyback operations, but it's there, you know. So I think that it's a nice addition, and I believe that a lot of this was also for engine servicing and caboose tracks and that sort of thing. And I'll be throwing down a turntable in just a moment. And that was another thing that got really crazy. The trackage around the turntable and roundhouse was just so bonkers. There was no way I was gonna fit it in here and it looked like it was intentional. Maybe I'll flash a photo of it up on the screen, because it was just a spaghetti bowl of track that was going in all different directions, and I don't even know how they got it all in there, but it's pretty ridiculous. Maybe I'll flash that up. I think when I bought the track maps, though, there was some kind of a copyright claim thing on there that I'm not supposed to be showing them, but I gotta look into that. Anyway, so these are the repair in place tracks that I'm putting down here on the left, and leading up into where the turntable is gonna go. And let's see, where are we? We're gonna put down this turntable, and there might be a better model for this than the one that I used. I think this is the same one that I used in Needles. And it's just, there's not a huge variety of turntables out there at the moment, so I just gotta use what's available. So this is the one I got, put it down. It could be considered a placeholder or whatever. It's not a big deal, it's not the end of the world. There's just so many other tracks in here that they have to worry about, that a turntable is not the biggest deal. It's not the end of the world if it's not exact. Although, if somebody wants to make me one, then, you know, wink, wink. Anyway, this is a good angle here. You can kind of see these ladders and the bypass tracks within bypass tracks, and oh man, lots and lots of trackage. And believe it or not, this build only took me, I think I worked on it for about 4 hours on Saturday and about 2 or 3 hours on Sunday. So it really wasn't too long. I mean, for something of this scale, it did take a while, but for something of this scale, it wasn't too bad. So I have high hopes that we'll be able to complete this entire build in a timely fashion, because if I could build this entire yard in basically one day, like if I did it continuously, then we could do the rest of this. Okay, so here I'm starting the Boston and Maine side. There's gonna be a big jump in just a moment, but this side is all Boston and Maine trackage, and just drawing out all the parallel tracks. Basically what I did was count out how many storage tracks there would be, and then I lay them down little sections, and then I just bring them all parallel and just stretch them all out. So there we go, big jump, and that was getting those parallel tracks down, and I'm trying to get in the ladder, and I think there's gonna be another big jump in a moment. But this got a little bit tricky as well. At one point I had to change the color of the mainline tracks, the two parallel mainline tracks, because it was just getting lost in the mix. So I changed them to a different ballast color. Actually, here I was using the track markers, but I discovered that changing the track ballast type, there it is, to white made it stand out a little bit more. And there's the completed ladder. So that's the Boston and Maine side of the yard. And this is doing the other end of the ladder, which I didn't show a whole lot of on camera because it got very, very confusing. That's gonna do it for this portion. Well, actually, that's gonna do it for my voice portion, but enjoy the rest of the time lapse, and I'll see you guys in just a moment during live mode. All right, well, here we are at the end of our journey, at the end of Rigby Yard. And I have to admit, well, first I have to apologize if my my voiceover over the time lapse was a little bit, I guess disjointed would be the way to say it. My brain is kind of all over the place, and to be perfectly honest with you, it's because this build has been giving me a considerable amount of anxiety. Just thinking about it and getting started on it and then doing the video and everything. I'm not really too sure why. I don't know if it's because it's such a big build, or if it's because it's the first prototype build that I've ever done, or if it's just because I want to get it right. So any one of those things, or all of those things, have been just making me really anxious about this and really just terrified to get started on it. So that's been going through my mind, especially when I was watching the playback on that. I'm like, oh man, how am I going to talk about this whole thing? It's just track work. But anyway, and then I also didn't really have too much prepared for it because I'm trying to throw this together very quickly. So apologies, future videos will be much more clear. I'll probably give a little bit more background on what I'm building and why, based on the actual prototype. I do have all 3 of the Morning Sun books on the Maine Central Railroad, and I have a pretty good amount of resources at my disposal. I have old track, aside from the old track charts and track maps, I have train schedules, including freight and passenger, and some other like Main Central memorabilia. So I've got some resources at my fingertips, ready to go. I feel like I'm pretty informed and ready to really crank this out, but still, it just scares the heck out of me. Anyway, let's just take a little bit of a look at some of this track work that I did off camera. You could see how crazy some of these junctions got, and there's just strange runarounds and bypass tracks and stuff like that. Like I said, yard ladders inside of yard ladders and things like that. And it all definitely makes sense in terms of like why they would do something like that. Like they put this yard ladder here so this bypass track can connect, you know, and they didn't have to have like a double slip switch or something along those lines. So there's plenty to look at, and plenty of it makes sense, but it got so confusing looking at it on paper and then trying to decide what tracks go where on here, and but I think I got it. I think it makes sense, it looks good, and for the most part I got all the tracks that I need to get down, and that's pretty much the bulk of it. I guess I'll talk about a couple of the things here, what the tracks are for. These were the Piggyback Tracks, as I mentioned in the time-lapse. Over here is marked as car cleanout tracks. I'm guessing it's these 3 tracks here because this is a bypass track. So maybe even just 2 of those tracks. I don't know how many cars they would need to be cleaning out, but this was the end terminal of the Main Central. So pretty much every car that was on the Main Central line got funneled through here at some point. So heading south, which is this way where my cursor is, that's going down towards Boston. That's the Boston and Maine trackage. And this is the Boston and Maine yard over here. I'm not too familiar with which tracks would be used for interchange, let's say, or just regular sorting and that sort of deal. So that's that. Let's take a look at some of these. These are old models. These are old Main Central locomotives from VMD. They are unfortunately no longer available, so we'll be trying to make some new ones. They came in both the green with gold sheen and the red with the maroon with gold sheen, which are pretty nice. There was a few variations of both of these, and as well as a gold with green decaling sheen, which I'm not really a huge fan of. I like the green with gold is my personal favorite for the GP7s. I think I have, this is an old model here, S4, so these would be doing some switching down in downtown Portland, which I'll show you in just a moment. I'm gonna get rid of that. And I think that there might be some other models that I have in here somewhere. Here's an old RS3 that I skinned like a jillion years ago, probably back for trains 2005, whatever, something. It's old, don't look at it. Let's get rid of that. This caboose is from JointedRail. This is one of a huge variety of cabooses that the Main Central had, so I hope to skin up a few more in different variations. My favorite is the extended vision caboose, and I believe this is the standard, I don't even know what this is called, northeastern whatever caboose. Very nice as well still. Actually, this is one of the ones that I was working on, which looks like crap, because I have no idea how to skin. But this is the extended vision caboose, this is what I like. It actually looks better on the shadow side, the colors and everything, but again, I'm just kind of messing around trying to get it right. Here's an old RS11. I don't know if there's any newer models. This one was from a zillion years ago as well. Don't look at that. And I think I have some Boston and Maine. Let me do a quick search here. Do B and M. Along with VMD's, what do we got here? Okay, so this is from JointedRail, Boston and Maine S4 switcher. There's another variation of it. This could be easily reskinned into Main Central. So there's that. And then we've got the Bluebirds. These are beautiful. I would love to get some updated models of these in all of their variations, because there were a few variations of the Boston and Maine Bluebirds. So this is just a sample of the type of equipment that you could see, or that you will see, around Rigby Yard. I don't have any GP38s that fit the bill, and certainly don't have the U25s or the U18s, but hopefully someday, the hope is to get a full content pack, sort of like the legacy of the B&N on JointedRail, where you could buy the route and then buy all the locomotives, like a huge pack of them, get a whole bunch of stuff. So that's the hope for that. But that's going down the future. We got a steamer too. Okay, so let's take a look at this dem file real quick before we head out of here. Back up. So this is the whole map. So this is Rigby Yard down here. Let's orient ourselves properly. This is south. This is north. We have Portland, Maine is right here. So some of the stuff that we can expect to see. There's an oil refinery sort of dealy dad here. We'll be doing a little bit of work on that. It'll probably be one of the first industries that we get onto. I'm not familiar with what industry is down here, so I'll have to do some exploration on the internet and see what the story is with that. Here we have the interchange. Actually, it's not really an interchange, but this Y track would lead down to downtown Portland. This track over here leads over to the Mountain Division, which, oh man, I would love to model the Mountain Division. Right in here was the old Portland Union Station, which I plan to include, even though it was demolished in the 70s. I do plan to include it and include the passenger train sets and stuff like that, because I think that's a lot of fun. And then heading up this way was what they called the low road, and then the back road. I can't remember which one is which, but we've got some side main lines that go up towards Watertown and northern Maine, so on and so forth. One part that I'm really excited to build eventually is all of downtown Portland. So this featured a lot, and I mean a lot, of street running. Lots of docks and wharfs that had to be switched, and a whole lot of buildings, like where the train tracks go inside of the building. So I have no idea how I'm gonna model that, but there were several small yards down here right along the waterfront, and a lot of wharfs and that sort of thing to switch out. So I'm pretty excited to do that. I don't know how we're gonna model this very well, but we'll get it. We'll do it. I have faith. I have confidence in myself, I think, and you guys to keep me on my toes. So we'll see how this all turns out. But obviously, all the excess periphery file, whatever you call it here, tiles, are going to be deleted. And hopefully, if this can get done and it's a success and not a massive failure or anything like that, I can continue on and do maybe the Mountain Division next, or work my way north. And I'm not gonna do, don't get the idea that I'm gonna do like the entire state of Maine or something like that, the entire Main Central, mile for mile, because that would just be ridiculous, and that would take years and years and years to do. So what I think I might do is model these big broad areas and then sort of distill down the areas in between, so that the distances are shorter, but some of the other major terminals and division point yards and stuff like that could be represented. So that's the idea with that. We'll take one final look here at the yard, and I'm gonna get going, guys. If this video went out at the right time, which it should have, yesterday should have been Thanksgiving, or maybe it's the day before when you're watching this. So I just want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving if you are from the United States. And everybody else, I hope you had a nice Thursday. So I'll see you guys in another episode of something or another on my channel here. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave all those things, leave that love, whatever else. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.